Every month, Cyber Collective hosts creative research events to educate and inform on technical topics related to data ethics, security, and privacy. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump right in.
All right, so thank you everyone for tuning in today. We're super excited to have you here. As you know, we are Cyber Collective and we're dedicating this month to election security, just really understanding what the hell it is, how does it affect us, are we going to be compromised this election or not, because we damn right were last 4 years ago. So we're going to go ahead and dive in and just go on to what we're going to chat about. So today, let's see. Can everyone see the screen? Thumbs up. I just want to make sure we're all aligned right now. Perfect. Sounds good. So the agenda for today, we're going to go over who the hell is Psycho? Who are we? Why we want you to get Psycho? Why we want you to get secure? This is my amazing team right here. I'll go ahead and introduce you on the next slide, but I'm just super happy to have you all here. So we're going to go over who we are, what we're about, what we're trying to accomplish with this group, and dig into our digital democracy with the Great Hack. So I'm ready for the next slide. Awesome. Who we are. We are woman-owned, immigrant-owned, Black-owned. You know what? I'm sorry, I have like 2 slides. I'm going to move this over here. So we are a woman-owned, immigrant-owned, Black-owned, Latinx-owned. We have so many women on our team from so many different backgrounds, and it's just so amazing to see a cybersecurity company made up of women of color. And put something in the chat box if you've seen any other like cybersecurity company that looks like this. I'm pretty sure you haven't. We are very intentional and thoughtful about the products we're creating and the information that we're sharing with you. Next slide, please. And this is our amazing Women of Psycho team. If you're on the team, I don't know, do a little dance or thumbs up. We'll be in the chat. Please don't hesitate to engage with us. We have an incredible assortment of like women that are super brilliant. And I'm just so lucky to be able to work with them. So next slide. So who we are. Psycho is a community-centered research organization, and we host events to teach you how to understand the ways data and privacy impact customers. It's just really important that you're aware of how we're trying to show the way that these things are impacting you and why they affect you. Next slide. So we educate the public in order to bring our voices to the forefront of data ethics dialogue. We're going to drop a survey in the chat. Please go ahead and fill it out right now so we can get a better understanding of how we can support you and what we can do to make this experience better for you. From all of our findings, we're going to create reports, briefings, and advocate for change to make sure that these laws and bills and technologies are used with us at the forefront versus using our data, actually making it in favor for us. Next slide. So psychoethics and rules of engagement. We want this experience to be amazing for you. We're here to learn and unlearn together. There is no place you're supposed to be in regard to what you should be knowing. We're just committed to challenging ourselves and challenging you to really think of the work that you're doing within your community. We're inclusive, we're authentic, we're community centered, and we're doing things with you in mind. So please just be super respectful in the comments. Please don't be scared to engage with us and ask us any question. We're here for you, and this is a safe space to learn. So with that being said, as Taz loves to say, put some respect on our name. We're just here to make sure this is a safe space to learn and unlearn. We just want to make sure that you feel good about leaving this event, as well as you're being able to share what you know in regards to cybersecurity, data privacy, or anything else.
Thank you, Vanessa. Hi, everybody. I'm Taz. If anyone doesn't know me and you're new here, I'm the founder of Cyber Collective, and obviously, as Vanessa mentioned, sharing this space with my amazing co-creators. So all of the team, you'll be able to interact with them tonight. So we're so excited. October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, right? Which is cute. More importantly, it's election season. So our entire focus, as Vanessa said, is going to be around the elections, whether it's around election security or digital manipulation that we're going to talk about today. So obviously we're digging into our digital democracy, and it is so crucial for us to understand how our democracy is being impacted by what we're doing online. Next slide, please. I think we kind of got a gauge, but if you didn't get to answer earlier, definitely let us know if you watched The Great Hack. And I think it's fair to say that maybe some of us need a refresher. If you haven't seen it in a long time, let's go ahead to the next slide and we can share the preview. And I think you might have to unmute yourself, Rebecca. Thank you. Can't hear anything.
You still can't hear it?
No. It is all good. We're still going to talk about it. It's totally okay. So this really brings us to what today is about. If you can switch over to the next slide, Rebecca, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's tea time. The purpose of today's event is for us to have a dialogue. I know that ever since I started doing online things, I continue to have such incredible dialogue with people in my DMs about how this, actually, I met so many women of Psycho through that exact fashion. 100% goes down in the DM. So let's open up the floor. Today is about everybody, and we're really looking forward to hearing from everyone. So I want to see everybody. I want us to get in a dialogue. Like, what were your initial reactions, and how did it make you feel when you found out that the 2016 election was practically, I mean, it was rigged pretty much. Like, what did that entice within you? I mean, from an emotional perspective, and then, like, did you know this beforehand?
Can I?
Yes, please.
I was like, do I need to raise my hand first before I say something? I think when I first started watching it, and I was just like realizing how much information, because in my mind I was like, oh, I'm not on Facebook or whatever, I'm not that weird. But when it was saying, 5,000 data points, and you didn't have to actually interact with the quizzes. If someone, your grandma, your aunt, your one roommate from college at one point decided that they wanted to do this quiz or put in this or do any of this information, it was like, boom, they had a connection to you, which took that whole, 6 degrees of separation thing and then turned it into this way larger idea. Because so often, I know when I was in college, I wasn't really thinking about who I was Facebook friends with. It was like, oh my God, like the entire freshman class at University of Florida. Of course I'm friends with all of you. Yes. So when you stop and kind of think about how much information was possibly being taken, and even if I wasn't necessarily one of the persuadables, it's still like the fact that they had this information, that they were able to take it without telling us what was going on. It was crazy. It was crazy. And then hearing how this was used, like with our election, how it was used with Brexit, how it's been used by like the military when they're trying to, when they were trying to keep, it was like between the Blacks and the Indians from voting. And it was like, they created these entire the entire campaigns. And it's like, you have no idea how that information is being used, and you don't even sometimes realize, like you see when we're talking about like TikTok and all these different viral things, and you're like, oh, this is just a really cool trend. And no, it's beyond a trend. It's
psychological warfare.
Exactly. And you're like, I didn't know it was psychological warfare. I was just doing a cool dance or whatever.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. 150% agreed. There was a question and I forgot it, but we want to hear more. Like, what are some other thoughts? And I see so many familiar faces.
I kind of have one. shot me back to just thinking about like how Facebook, how he started this, you know, to like rate like the college girls, and just how that snowballed to like rating women, to data mining, to using all of us, right? And to Ashley's point, I thought about like deactivating my Facebook so many times and just keeping like very little connection on there. But unfortunately, it is also the great connector. So it's like people from your job, that's how you, and I know because I've done like freelance makeup work. So it's like, that's how I've gotten a lot of my jobs, or, you know, keeping in touch with family. So just for it to snowball from something like that to rigging our election and putting us in the position that we're in now, I think is like the scariest thing. And that coupled with the social dilemma, I was just like, I need to know more. I want to learn more. And that's why I'm really glad that I'm here. And I'm excited to hear the rest of the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's literally why this space exists, is because why aren't these conversations happening more often? It affects all of us. And I remembered my question. Ashley brought it up earlier, and then even you touched on it, Sandra, the element of being persuaded, right? While I was watching The Great Hack and just being like in this space and researching, sometimes I have to think like, damn, did I just get got by this? I have a fucking always pan. I definitely got by Instagram. I know everybody has gotten the always pan advertisements, okay? It's like the super Instagram pink ceramic pan. And you're so easily, they know exactly what I want, and then you respond, right? Anybody else had any initial thoughts?
Yeah, there were three kind of like main takeaways that I guess I ended up having. This is a space that I was in. My master's was in cybersecurity policy. So following this was kind of a flashback of like, you remember the good old days of Cambridge Analytica and the Mueller report? Like that's kind of the initial vibe. But the three big things was, one, when they're like, oh, this started with military contracting, I was like, of course it did. Of course this started there. There's so many things that are designed and are built for the military, and then they eventually get moved onto the general public and the civilian population. And that was just like, it wasn't necessarily like shocking, but it was kind of surprising, you know, that like duality there. And then the other big one was, I had followed a lot of Cambridge Analytica specifically with the election, but I wasn't aware of much as the process that was happening with Brexit and in Britain. And learning that, and learning the export-import laws that were surrounded about it and the weaponization of it, again, just reached back to that whole, like, of course it started with the military. And a lot of those, I think, pieces of the history and what they were testing and what they were trying, and then when they used it, was just, yeah, it was shocking, it was surprising, it was terrifying, and it was also not all at the same time, because it's like, I think those things are kind of expected in some instances if you spend some time in this space. And then the last one was the crooked Hillary campaign. I had people I was connected with on Facebook that were sharing that. And when I saw that ad, I was like, oh my goodness, that originated from this. So there was a lot of dots, I think, collected for me that put more context to an issue and something that I had already been following during that time, and just bringing it back to how deep it goes, really.
I would say for me personally too, it feels like a level of disrespect towards me and my data and my privacy that I didn't know was even a thing. Like it's like ignored disrespect, right? Like they just treat us like nothing, and this is an obvious. And so for me personally, I work in social media and I'm an advocate for social media. I'm on it all day, and I've been telling colleagues and, you know, my dad, who borderline conspiracy theories out there all the time, I've been telling him like, no, social is good. It is a good thing, right? Like it is helping us spread communication and stay connected. Like Sandra said, like it is for good. And I'm going to be like an agent of an ambassador of like good social media interaction. And then to what Taz said, it's like, I see all this shit happening and I'm like, I'm like one of y'all's warriors for like how bad social can be, you know, like, and you feel disrespected. Like I've basically framed like my life around this. And it's like, oh, so not everything I do is good. And that kind of sucks.
How do you all think that maybe after seeing the great hack, how do you think this is affecting our election right now? And is there anything that you have seen throughout this election period that you're now connecting to? Or are you in just constant conspiracy mode at all times, which I totally, I commend that. I'm that way.
Yeah, I'm definitely in constant conspiracy mode myself. I'm always trying to figure out where did this originate from? What does this reporter share? Let me check their Twitter. Like, I just feel like there's no comfortability of just looking at a source of information and just being like, oh, okay, I'm going to take this at face value. Anything you read online now, you kind of have to just dive deeper and deeper into figuring out what the hell is going on. And you also don't get a break from this constant cycle in this election to just catch up with the news from yesterday because something new happened today. And how much of that is also supposed to be like that, to give us in this constant state of worry and helplessness where we feel like we're not being able to work together for positive changes.
And I sent something to the team earlier, I think it was yesterday or today, but Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook is leading the internet ethics dialogue. I lost my marbles when I saw that. Can we talk about that for a second? Like, can you imagine allowing Mark baby face ass Zuckerberg, like, look at his face first off. You look scary. And then you want to be the one to manage our internet ethics. You ruined the fucking internet. Like you were literally the reason why so much damage is happening, right? Because there was no ethics. And you know, just reeling it back in as far as our organization and why these surveys that you guys take are so important. It's because right now, I looked up so many different ethics or tech ethics organizations. I mean, all white team, all white board, fully male, maybe some coloring of females here and there. And how can we expect them to represent us and our voices, right? And marginalized voices. And so that's why we're pulling this data. And what we're doing is empowering everybody that comes to these events to learn about this information. And then once you learn it, we want your opinions. What do you want to do and say about ethics? You give us your feedback, and then we take it, we create data sets and articles, and then we advocate for it, like actual public policy advocacy. That's what Cyber Collective does. That's what these events are about. They are research events to empower you and educate you, and then take that data and advocate for real change in policy to happen. Anyway, I think very passionately about this, but like, what do you guys, as far as, has ethics been a point of concern for you and the internet prior to maybe watching The Great Hack? Like, how have you interacted with that concept even? Has it been something relevant?
I think that the ethics of what we put on the internet and how it's handled became more of something in my mind, like when everything started blowing up with Cambridge Analytica, when it would be like when there was all the news about this is what's happening, this is what's going on. I think after watching The Great Hack, it made me stop and think less about my personal ethics, because I've already been like, I try to like kind of I've in some ways removed myself, and then I'm always like, I'm very aware of like, okay, what am I sharing? Why am I sharing it? What is my intent? And if the intent of this other person isn't good, can I at least back up the information? Is the information factual? But then I start thinking more about the intent when it comes to younger people. Like we have kids who, for me, like, sure, I grew up on the internet to a degree, but then we have these kids who like literally grew up on the internet. And I get worried for, you know, how they are being so incredibly influenced by things. I mean, I know there was all the talk about like YouTube videos or something, and how they take some of the information, like they take some of the videos that are meant to be for kids, and then they're putting in like all sorts of like crazy, ridiculous propaganda stuff. And it's like, if I was a parent who was, you know, just trying to get my kid off my back because I'm working from home, and could you please just watch these YouTube videos and be chill for a moment? It's crazy, because the ethics of that, like, the fact that there are people who believe so strongly that what they're doing is right. Like, I want to, the fact that in their minds they do have ethics, and like, yeah, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're trying to make this country as strong as it can be. And I'm like, holy shit! Like, how is there a way even to really rectify it? I don't want to. I'm not saying control, but like reform, whatever. Like, how can we fix these things? Because I mean, it's fucking crazy. Live.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, how you said, how are we trying to reform these things? There aren't many politicians or different people that are actually advocating for this. So many people profit off of this information and this data, and they become so incredibly rich by using us against each other, you know, pitting marginalized voices to the bottom where you can't hear them. And with that being said, I wanted to ask the follow-up question: how many of you were aware of, I remember this was trending on like the internet, where AOC was grilling Mark Zuckerberg. And I wonder how many people in this chat or in this group right now know that that stemmed from the Cambridge Analytica hack. Did you just think that Facebook was, you know, in Congress getting grilled for other reasons, or did you know that it was directly correlated to the 2016 elections? Yeah, we wanted to play a clip, but you know, the internet and technology sometimes doesn't work in our favor. But I really like this question that she asked in regard to when Facebook was going to launch their cryptocurrency company Libra. And she asked, in order for us, or she made a statement basically, in order for us to make decisions about Libra, I think we need to know we kind of need to dig into your past behavior and Facebook's past behavior and respect to our democracy, which I feel is so profound, because he has no respect for our democracy at all. And she asked him 6 pretty profound questions in regard to, he was going to say that, like, he basically said, you can't lie on a political ad for these elections. And this was, you know, years ago now. And here we are with elections, you know, 20-ish days away. She said, you announced recently that the official policy of Facebook now allows politicians to pay to spread disinformation in 2020 election and in the future. So I just want to know how far I can push this in the next year. Under your policy, using consensus data as well, could I pay to target Black predominantly zip codes and advertise them the incorrect election day? He says, no, Congresswoman, you couldn't. We even, for these policies around the newsworthiness of content that politicians say, basically a non-answer. And she said, but you just said you're not going to fact check my ads. So, like, what is going on right now? This year has been the year of disinformation, continued from past years. And I just want to know what everyone else thinks about that, and what the hell.
I feel like when you said that, I think about how maybe like in the 2016 election, I didn't think as much about like like data mining or my information being sold to anybody. And to your point, Vanessa, when you talked about like politicians aren't going to be talking about making money and selling all this information, and neither are people that are, you know, being listened to. So like celebrities or other like people with platforms, because they all benefit, right? It generates income. Just so there's money. There are many like tentacles in that pot of money. So since 2018, and then I think recently, I saw a post by Taz, I think it was about like clicking mindfully, and I shared it because this entire year, I'm sure we've all, you know, we've all seen it. We all have time, a little bit more time than we usually have. When I would click on ads or like articles that people would post, I was noticing more and more that I'm like, I've seen this before, or like I've read this somewhere, and the article was dated back like up to 4, 5, 6 years before this person was sharing it. And so then I was just like, I like backed up and I went and I'm like, have I been doing this? Like, am I totally falling for the clickbait thing? So when I posted that, and this wasn't very long ago, so many people were like, oh my God. And so then it made me think back to like hearing about Cambridge Analytica, but not going back to watch The Great Hack until recently, just because it's like, I really got to know, because I don't want to get got. I don't want to keep getting got, you know? And so that's what's been really interesting. So I know that like, even in my like personal circle, no one is in like the tech world, but we're talking about it more because, like Ashley said, I work with high schoolers, right? They don't know another time before technology. So for us, it's been really important to, and specifically in like the mental health field. So because their lives are so affected by like social media and what they're reading, and they ask about all these things and what we think, it we go back to the, just make sure you're fact checking, make sure you're always looking at who wrote it, what they write about, like Vanessa was saying as well. So all this information is super helpful right now.
I wanted to volunteer my very, very good friend, Rachel, who is a privacy expert and privacy attorney, who's building an incredible tool right now to help us consumers and enterprises with privacy. Just your thoughts from a kind of legislative perspective on what's happening. I know you said some stuff in the chat, but you know, this is your everyday. So how do you see this affecting just policy?
Um, so I think a couple people have articulated before, the law is behind in terms of technology, and it will continue to be behind. If anybody's read the CCPA or the CPRA, which is the new regulation out of California, you know it's misinterpreted multiple times. The Attorney General in California is still sending out the opinions. And you have Silicon Valley constantly pushing back. I've worked at Fortune 500 companies, and we spent millions, if not $500 million, pushing back against privacy regulations, because my particular business is insurance, and actuariums make so much money and insurance companies make so much money on data. So my point in the chat was, I think privacy policies would be pushed by consumers because companies don't and will not want to do this. If we saw when Cambridge Analytica came out and Facebook had to stop using that as their business model, they dipped almost a half of their valuation. And this will continue to happen. You have TikTok who's doing the same thing in terms of their company valuation, because data really is their main model. But it will be up to the consumers as well as the outside countries. So the European Union or Brazil, who are having huge lawsuits and ending different privacy shields that's going on in the US. So the EU courts have kind of dealt a blow to the US court system and the legal system by saying, hey, you can't do this to our customers, consumers. So I think privacy will catch up, but it's going to be up to consumers to push it, because our companies are in bed and we want to make money.
100%. And, you know, this is a trend in the US. Clearly, they implement or don't implement laws, and then we got to turn the shit around. Just think about what the US was built on. You know what I'm saying? Like, every time the public and the people have to initiate a lot of the change that we are looking for. And the EU is light years ahead. I think there are, what is it, Rachel, like 16 privacy laws that kind of exist within different states. And there are a couple that are still in committee. And something that really messed me up while I was doing research was the fact that many states opted out of having a state level privacy law. Instead, they developed a privacy committee. And my whole thing is, who the fuck is a part of that committee? Like, who's a part of that ethics group? I don't want Dick, John, and Harry talking for me about what kind of privacy I need in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they're not asking Black women what they think about privacy. They're not asking immigrants and people of color, undocumented people that are affected so heavily by surveillance and privacy. Like, they're not reaching the right groups. So again, this is why these events are so important, because once we all understand and learn, it's up to us to push for the policy and make sure that our voices are heard. And the ethics around that is so important.
You know what the craziest thing about that is, when you said that, and when you were like, you know, we're the people that they need to be talking to, because we're the voices. And I was just like, wow. And this is going to sound so stupid, y'all. Please don't laugh at me. I mean, you're not going to laugh. You're going to be like, holy shit, you're right. But it hits me how all is done on purpose. Like, they just don't give a fuck. They're like, we don't want to know what you have to say. We don't care about, like, how is this going to impact you as a minority? How is this going to impact you as a woman? Because why the fuck would we care? We care about our money. We care about our pockets. And if the best way that we can get what we want is by silencing you, and is by just not including you in the conversation because you don't know what's going on anyway, they don't even have to pretend to listen. You know, they're like, oh, you say what you want to say, nothing's going to change. And because they have it, like, they're like, we have the power, and therefore we don't need to listen to you. And that is such an insane and maddening thing, because as I stop and look at our country as a whole, and I keep thinking, like, we want to make it better, we want to make it better. And it's like, holy shit, the amount of time it will take for us to actually get any sort of progress, it literally kind of makes me want to cry, because I'm like, it's going to take so long to get there. And it might not be in my lifetime that we actually see any true, like, change when it comes to, you know, data mining, when it comes to, you know, white supremacy, when it comes to all these different things that are going on in the world. And it's just like, but that's how we do the work now, so that maybe if the world is still here in a few decades, generations, whatever, then it can be better and more equitable for everyone. But fuck, it's really depressing.
I agree with you completely. And that's actually a perfect segue, because you talk about these different power dynamics between these massive corporations and us, basically, and our information. So Rebecca, if you can throw the next slide up. I just want to thank everyone for sharing. It's been such a cool conversation to see everyone kind of get involved and engage this way. So I really want us to think about the fact that we also have a lot of responsibility, and we need to take back our power. When we share and consume information online, we have such a responsibility to handle this information, this data, mindfully. I think big tech has done such a good job with training us to be sloppy with our information. Like, we sign up for different services online, we buy things online, we use our real names, real phone numbers, real addresses, we share posts, we like things just carelessly, willy-nilly. And I think we need to start thinking of that data that we share with these big platforms as really, really valuable and powerful. I want you to know that your data is power. So let's kind of talk about the different words that we use when we refer to our data. So conceptions of data. In the Great Hack, going back to that, there's such a big tension between how Facebook and Cambridge Analytica think of the data that we share with them, and between how people like us and you know, how data rights activists, how people like Kate, you mentioned this, it is so disrespectful that the way that they treat our data. And that's because, like, we're thinking about our data in a completely different way. And it's so important for us to be, like, explicit about, okay, we're thinking about data either as property or as extensions of ourselves, because that changes the way that we treat those things. So Facebook and Cambridge Analytica think of that data that we're sharing with them as property. Like, if I'm Facebook, once you hand over your data to me, you like things, you share things, you hover over certain posts on your newsfeed, I can do whatever I want with it, because now it's my property. I'm Facebook. Like, as long as you agreed to my terms and conditions and my privacy policy, that's just like jargony bullshit that makes absolutely no sense, I can do whatever I want. I can sell it, I can let third parties access it, whatever. And we are having this conversation where we're thinking of that data as, like, extensions of ourselves. At the end of the movie, they have, like, those different tweets that say, data rights are human rights. Data rights are human rights. So it's like this data is an extension of ourselves such that there are rights around it to be violated. And those are two incredibly different things. So I really want us to challenge, I want us to challenge ourselves to think about how we're thinking of the data that we share. Like whether we think of the data as an extension of ourselves or as property, just know that your data has power. Particularly as we head into the elections, your posts have power. I'll give you an example of how this kind of plays out before I hand things over to Taz. She'll get into kind of the details of how we can actually practice that digital mindfulness as we head into the elections. So who remembers Blackout Tuesday? A couple months ago, the Black Lives Matter hashtag was just being used. You know, it was primarily before that day being used to disseminate really important information about the protests. So where they were, how to protect yourself, how to protect your friends, what to do in case you got arrested. And the sentiment behind Blackout Tuesday was to stand in solidarity with Black people in America and to hold space for their experiences with systemic racism, to hold space for their experiences with police brutality. And the sentiment and the intent behind it was so good, but when it ended up actually happening is that hashtag that was being used to spread really important information, all that information was buried under these black squares. So the key takeaway here is to know that our posts really do have the power to change things in real life beyond our phones and beyond our computers. And really quickly, I think I have time. I want us all to also know that algorithms decide so much of our reality and our world today. So who gets a loan, who gets a job, what you see on your Facebook newsfeed, what kind of search results you get when you search in Google. Know also that these algorithms that are deciding what content to show us are not neutral. It's so easy to kind of get sucked into this misconception that these algorithms are just completely unbiased because they're like math and logic and data science, right? Totally not the case. At the end of the day, these algorithms are created by people, and the data sets that are used to train them are developed and created by people. And so all of that reflects the biases of the people who create them. And so we have to know that it is possible for these algorithms to influence real outcomes in the real world beyond our phones and computers. And so when we're on Facebook, when we're on social media, especially as the elections approach, know that it's possible, know that it's possible for things to really be impacted, and just see all the information with a critical lens. And as a side note, if you want to learn more about algorithmic bias, something I'm super passionate about, I really recommend Sophia Noble's book, Algorithms of Oppression. Kathy O'Neill also has a really great book, Weapons of Math Destruction. They go into really great detail about how algorithms really change our world. So let's understand that our posts have power. The information that we choose to share has power. And if we understand this, if we understand that the posts we share have power, then maybe we treat this data a little bit differently. And so I'm going to hand things over to Taz. She'll talk a little bit more about how exactly we can treat this data differently, and specifically how we can practice digital mindfulness every day.
Okay, Caro, I don't even need to show up to any of these anymore because that was impeccable. That was so amazing. You did a phenomenal job of breaking that down. Thank you. Last night while I was working on this PowerPoint, I laughed for about 35 seconds building the slide because you see the binary in the back and the Buddha and the digital mindfulness. I mean, like, I was really excited about it. If you could go to the next slide, Rebecca, this one is just me being funny. So let's talk about, there's nothing that I really need to repeat. I think Caroline hit on every single point that matters. And the one thing that I have been screaming for a really long time has been the idea of trying, first off, slow down, just slow down a second. And it's so important for us to become mindful and go through this process, at the Cycle 101 event last week, I said, like a 5-minute audit, right? Like a personal risk audit almost. And this is where asking these questions are so important as you go through. And if somebody invites you to an event of some sort and you've never used the tool before and you're kind of weary of downloading a new app, I hope you are, you know, understand how your digital exhaust continues to expand. You want to ask yourself a few questions before you just go ahead and sign up for something. But, you know, first let's talk about consciously sharing, right? These are questions, you see those kind of infographics go around all the time, like the Rumi quotes, like, is it true? Is it kind? Before you speak. And we want to implement that similar type of mindfulness, but around what we share, right? Like, is this information true? Like, did you look up a primary resource to figure out if this is true before you shared a headline? I'm guilty of it. I know we're all guilty of it, but if we really do just slow down, it allows us to process and figure out, okay, is this information true before I share it? Did I check the resources? You know, do I know who wrote this article, this publication, what their background is? You might share something and then not even realize the affiliations of that individual, because there are layers to this shit. You know what I'm saying? There are layers to everything, and everything is affiliated and connected. I always say, like, we're mediums, right? We're all interconnected, and it's the World Wide Web. And, you know, to make sure we slow down, our goal here when we talk about implementing mindfulness is really from the element of making this, like, pulling at our pathos, right? Pathos, logos, ethos, our ethics, our logic, and our emotion. And so bringing the emotion into something that's very technical, because so far tech has been tech and it's not been something that is associated with any emotion. And so how will this affect the people I care about? How will this affect movements I support? And when you ask yourself these questions, it will help you think twice on whether or not you should share something, right? Like, even with a lot of, like, triggering content that we share that we want to, like, spread awareness of, but sometimes I have to go through the process, like, is this worth sharing right now? I cannot share this video and just share what I think about it. I don't have to share murder on screens all the time, right? Perfect question, Maggie. Like, does this do more harm than good? And so once you're able to think about consciously sharing, you'll automatically start thinking about consciously clicking, which is something that I push for so hard. Think before you click. Think before you click. Please, please. If you're getting emails, if you are, you know, this goes back into social engineering and phishing, receiving, like, drop a yes in the chat if you have gotten, like, random text, like, your package is here, or like, you got an Amazon gift card, or somebody calls you, like, you owe taxes and you're gonna get arrested if you don't pay them. Like, all of these different messages, like, all of that is social engineering and phishing attacks. And what those attacks do is basically manipulate you with your own information that's public and available online. And then you get got because you click. And then when you click, you enable access. So you want to make sure that you're always thinking before you click, copy and paste the link into your web browser before you just click something out of your email. Especially, it's like, oh, my homegirl sent me an Amazon gift card. She hasn't given me a gift in ever. So she's probably not giving you a gift, sis. It's a phishing attack. You know what I mean? And then going into also accessibility. So such a large part of where we are today from a policy perspective, access, why Cambridge Analytica, why Facebook, why so many of these applications that redistribute our third-party information is able to do what they do is because we skip the terms and conditions and we have given our rights up. We never checked for it. We weren't asking questions. And now we've come as far as we have. And we're like, well, fuck, damn, how are we going to fix this now? Because this is not good anymore. And so there are still new tools that are being pushed out at all times. And a lot of these tools are malicious tools. And when I say malicious, they might be a convenience app, but they don't care about ethics. So they're just sharing that data that they collect of you. Like, many companies exist, and from the forefront, it looks like it's something, but they're really just making money off of your data, right? It's not really the service that they're selling you that they're making off of. It's the access that you have enabled them that they're making money off of. And you do that when you accept terms and conditions, and when you accept the privacy policy, and when you enable certain access on your phone. You download an app and it says, will you allow photo access? Will you allow microphone access? Allowing microphone access means they have permission to drop into your microphone at all times. That's why Instagram is able to give you ads, right? And I think that everybody here is probably familiar with that element, and that's why you're here. And you know, it goes back into, does this app really need those permissions? If you have a flashlight app and it's asking you access into your photos, for what? And if you're giving access into your photos, come on. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing? Be a little more sensible about that, and just slow down. And that's my biggest takeaway. The more I work in tech, the more I learn. My husband helps me slow down a lot. He's from the West Coast and I'm from New York, and he's really brought the element of mindfulness. And I know he's on this call, so he's going to be really happy hearing that. He really implemented like the element of mindfulness into my life. And I realize how fast I'm going and how much access that I have given. And so it's extremely important that we consider these things, right? And so I want everybody on the call to like give me like a Boy Scouts honor pledge right now that you promise to skim the terms and conditions before you click yes. Say you promise, pinky promise with me, okay? Pinky promise. Go in there and give me a pinky promise, and you're gonna skim the terms and conditions. And now, because there are laws being pushed out, we have the opportunity to catch people, and CCPA has basically told companies that you have to show your privacy policies, and it's a lot more accessible now, right? So you don't really have the excuse like it's lost in the sauce. They're not. It's there, and it tells you exactly like our privacy policy. And I know everybody gets emails all the time like, our privacy policy changed. Google just sent one about Google Drive. Their privacy policy updates are coming at all times. Like, take a second and read through it, because this is your digital livelihood. This is your existence. It is your democracy. It is your safety, right? And it matters. And so you have to be involved with this process. Otherwise, don't get mad. If you're not going to read the terms and conditions, don't be angry, because you're doing it to yourself, right? And we all carry our own agency. So thank you. That is the element, and I think we have some more information to share, and I'm going to switch it over to Rebecca.
Well, we definitely want to keep this momentum going with the elections coming up, as Taz and Vanessa mentioned earlier. We're not only voting for candidates in this November, this upcoming election, we're also going to be voting on policy, and we need to make sure that we're educated on what's going to be on our ballot. A lot of times, the legal jargon is confusing. We don't know what's going on. So we want to help you break that down next week. It's going to be the same time, same place, right here. Make sure you invite a friend and let everybody know, again, because elections are coming up very, very soon, and we need to know what's going on. It's going to be me and Maggie, who is the Deputy Director of Research and Development. So we have some great information coming your way. And we, of course, also have our newsletter. We send out reminders for upcoming events, recaps of events, and other great information that you definitely do not want to miss out on. If you go to cybercollective.org, you can find this exact screen right here. First name, last name, email address, and of course, we respect your privacy. And don't worry, we're not going to spam you. It is one quality newsletter a week. So make sure you guys sign up for that, and you will get lots of reminders and just great information coming your way. Again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for engaging in discussion with us and some great dialogue. It's really great to see all the awareness and just all of the different perspectives coming in together, because that's what this is all about. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we cannot wait to see you again next week. We're still going to be online for a few more minutes if you guys have any last comments or any last questions. So if you have anything, feel free to either drop it in the chat or just speak up, and we'll be here.
I just want to say this is an amazing group of people that are just putting all their input out there. That's just amazing to see because it's hard to relate with my inner circle of friends that I have that are not interested in tech or anything like this. So it's really cool to see all of you out there just putting your input. So I just wanted to share that. That's really amazing.
Let's take a photo. So if you're here and if you're comfortable with sharing your video screen, I saw somebody joined a Zoom user. I don't know who you are, but it's sketchy. You didn't use your name. Just and I see you. So if you go ahead and pull up your screen, because we about to take photos. Y'all know I don't play around. I haven't changed just because we're in public spaces. All right, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Get psycho. Oh my God. This is awesome. The one thing that I also wanted to mention was our post event. We're gonna send the same newsletter out survey in our newsletter. So if you didn't get a chance to fill out the newsletter today, we would be honored if you could fill out the newsletter once we do send or fill out the survey once we do send the newsletter. Thank you. I see.
Do we have any final questions, thoughts? Also, I mean, I think since we have a few more minutes, what sort of events would you all like to see, or what is pressing on your mind right now that you're like, damn, I wish I saw an event like this? As we were sharing, I have a book club and we were talking about algorithms of oppression. It was very interesting that so many people in the space weren't aware that the technology is, when you type in Latina, Black girl, we already are so hyperly sexualized. And that was something that, in speaking with people that aren't in technology, they were just blown away by stuff like that. And I always try to be mindful of the information that I'm sharing. Is this accessible in a way that people that aren't in a particular space will understand? So if there's anything that you wish that you could understand more or that others could understand more, please feel free to speak freely right now so that we can just make sure we have the best content for everyone involved.
Okay, straight up. Oh,
Allie, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Straight up, I want to know, like, I've been thinking about this for years. How do I clean up and get rid of old accounts that, like, I might not even know I have? Like, it has been driving me nuts because you know how we were, like, back in the day, like back in high school, like middle school, we signed up for any and everything. And like recently I got an email from Tumblr that was like, hey, you haven't used your profile in a while. Like, can we release this name? I didn't even want to click on it because I was like, I think I used Tumblr like twice. But like, how do I get rid of that stuff? Like, I'd like to know that.
So it's really difficult, and that's something like I had a few months ago. I was like, I have an amazing product idea. I'm gonna figure out how to connect. And so, long story short, I spoke to a lot of different security architects and engineers about this. And unfortunately, there isn't a simple repository that you can find, right? Because we all have unique identifiers on the internet, and based off of our devices, based off of what information that we have the chain of information that's associated to our unique identifier. And because we don't have federal consumer data protection laws, there isn't like a central repository that exists. There are organizations though. There's a company called Blackout Cyber, and they have a subscription service. I have not tried this tool myself, but I do know the gentleman that developed this tool. He has been in the security space, specifically within the intelligence world. When I worked in the public sector on DoD contracts, I worked with him very closely. We did projects together, so I know he's a reputable individual, but sometimes people make really trash tools. So I don't know, I haven't tested it, but I'm pretty sure it's really good. And it'll do a scrub and it will maintain. It's more preventative. So unfortunately, short answer, there isn't a way. If you can remember, and what I would suggest doing is what's your oldest email account that you can remember? And if you look up account in your email, like search the word account, it might pull up, or look up like password or username or something like that, or even the word welcome, right? And look up certain keywords in your email and try to find those old email accounts and maybe go back and try to delete the information. Unfortunately, so many, like I tried to go through this process myself, and many of those organizations no longer exist, right? Or like, there's no way, my first email address was mommygotVocals@AOL.com. Okay, mommy got vocals, but with like spelled like this. And so there's a lot that exists. My Zanga was on that. And so there's so much information, but I would start with Blackout Cyber. I would start with that personal audit if you can do it. And you can also, there are organizations that will do digital scrubs, but they're not as legitimate because it works on the enterprise level, but doesn't necessarily jive with consumer level stuff. But that's something I'm looking into and researching. And I know that Rachel, as she builds out her tool that is going to literally change democracy and privacy itself, by the way, if people don't know, check out elroy.ai. There's more coming out on it, but let's see if that's a question that she can answer, and maybe we can look into deeper together. Monique, you were gonna say something? I can't hear you, boo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I realized I was muted. It was just going back to the Great Hack, and I forget her name, but the main female that they followed throughout, you know, the film.
Brittany
Kaiser.
Yeah, earlier in the comments you were saying, how do we know we're not persuadable? And I feel like or Whole House watched The Great Hack after you were talking about it on Instagram, and we felt like by the end of it, or like throughout it, she ended up becoming a persuadable. Like she became that data point that they were focused on. Previously, she was on the Obama campaign, and because of circumstances, really, right, she said they couldn't pay her, or they couldn't pay her enough. She moved to Cambridge Analytica, where she was getting a check, right? Her family didn't have money. They lost a bunch of stuff, and now you have a check. And so, you know, I feel like she had an idea of the work she was doing. She definitely knew what she was doing, you know, but it's like, when do you pull out? Or you feel like you're too deep in? Do you step back, or do you just like keep getting a check? And as things unfolded during the court processes, you know, she turns against Cambridge Analytica, whatever. And it just like goes to show it was that. And then we had a bunch of philosophical questions back and forth after the film. And we were just like, yeah, we like, depending on the circumstance and the realities of like your situation, you might end up a persuadable, even though like we feel very strongly about something right now.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, sorry about. I love that you bring that up, Monique, because I had mixed feelings throughout the movie. I was like, is she not necessarily a good guy or bad guy, but I was just trying to figure out, like, you went along with it because it didn't affect you until it did affect you. And at first I was confused as like, is she an undercover reporter? Was this her whole thing? But essentially she could have stopped what she was doing so long ago if she had spoken up. And also, she's a woman. Her power maybe wasn't that extreme, or like that. She probably couldn't do much, but I was just I definitely had mixed feelings about her involvement. I was like, okay, you went along with it until you decided, nah, you know, I don't know. Still have mixed feelings about it, but could that have been me? Because I'm getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
I feel 100%. And then it was also all these like older white men, right? She started campaigning at 14, and she said this is 10 years later. So she's somewhere in her late 20s, early 30s right now. Her career has started and ended pretty much. And so you had this older white guy with a card, and he was just like, let me talk to you, get you drunk, and steal your secrets.
Yeah, and that's like, the security industry, the reason Cyber Collective exists was because those were the spaces that I was exposed to at all times, and just being in sales and seeing what's happening on the back end. And courting government officials and taking like people that create large mission critical contracts as it relates to our national security and the shit that they do and what goes on. Like we would spend tens of thousands of dollars on custom Tom Ford suits and shit at events to get people to buy a particular product, right? Like, you know, when I first started in the industry, I was young and there were so many things, like I've always been outspoken, but things that I allowed to happen because I'm like, damn, I'm getting paid right now. I used to live in my car, so fuck everybody, I'm gonna get my money. And I think that I say this, and somebody a long time ago said this to me, and it's, you have to do the things that you need to do in order to do the things that you want. And that is something that I live by forever. And that was something that she did, right? And think about how young you are when you're 14, how persuadable, like those dudes were fucking predators on her, like straight up predators. And that's why they hire a certain type of individual. They hire excitable people in order to take advantage. And it's the amount of sociopathic men that I have dealt with and met in the cybersecurity industry and what they're capable of and what I've seen. I've met more sociopaths than I have met good people, 150%. And so it is problematic. I'm speaking like I was going to be on the same panel as her, but then they asked me to join a different panel because there wasn't any like one female or colored presence. They're like, we are really trying to diversify. Can you bring your voice somewhere else? I was like, damn, I really wanted to talk to Brittany Kaiser though. So I'm excited. I'm speaking at a Europol event and it's called the Eden Network. It's the European Data Experts Network. And we're talking about consumer protection. And I'm really excited to just hear where she is today because I haven't seen any of her talks, but I do see she's pushing she has an organization called Own Your Data Foundation. And I just got her book too, and it's called Targeted. Maybe this is something that we can all read together if we haven't. And it's so far, it's like, it's just her story. And I'm excited to see like what her experience was like as a woman, as just somebody that went through this process. But yeah, it's like sometimes I want to be like, damn, you're kind of problematic, but also I probably would have done the same thing, honestly, because I'm not going to sit here and act like taking care of my family isn't my first priority. And if somebody was paying me, I'm gonna do what I have to do, and then I'm gonna come back and handle it after, right? And I think that's why people, you know, do certain problematic things, right? Sorry, went into a tangent, but yeah.
I would say though that I think the whole point is that it's not necessarily about the individual, it's about the phenomena. It's not always about this person is a bad person and they were susceptible. I think it's always speaking to that larger system and the psychology behind it too. Like we're talking about weapons grade psychological warfare and how that's replicated. And so I think what it ties back to is advocating for, you know, we're not in a war zone. We should not have civilians subjected to weapons grade military tactics for the sake of profit because there is no advocacy at the consumer level.
What is the guy that she's with the entire time that like goes through the process with her? I don't remember his name, but
Alex?
Alex, yes, because to what Monique was saying about how she knew, and like they were all talking about how she just knew she was doing something like some fucked up shit, but she kept kind of going. He says that, I remember, and I don't know why it was stuck in my head, because he says, oh, it looks like she has some sort of moral compass, but then again, and then he stops and he's like, but then again, she knew time and time again and could have gotten out but didn't. And honestly, to all of what like Taz was saying, when I like same thing, like 10 years ago, you know, I was in a space for organizing, and I became disenchanted because you see that people, you know, sometimes like the people that are like head organizers, right, are doing all these things and maybe they don't make sense to you, and you're looking at somebody like, wow, and like this is totally just like a personal experience, and I'm thinking with a judging lens, like everybody's in it for personal gains, da, 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 but you don't think about, okay, if you were in that position, what would you do, right? And so that humanizes, like it kind of, when he says, I think Alex says, like, I believe in redemption, and that entire part of it, I think it made me really think back to that time, and like looking at things like something like this, right? Think about cybersecurity and how many, like even when I saw like the social dilemma, how many of those people look so nervous because they are, you know, probably in a sense also trying to find or look for their redemption, thinking I did what I had to take care of business, and now I want to right my wrong, you know? So I don't know, it's just an interesting thought. And I just, when Monique mentioned that they were having that conversation, I remember being stuck on that thought too, like where Alex kind of questioned that, and thinking about like myself, what would I do, you know, if I was Brittany Kaiser in that situation. And even though I feel like I would want to throw up if I had to join the NRA, like she lets us know why, you know, like my family was hurting and I had to take care of my mom, and it made me look at her a little bit different when she started talking about that, because I think it was strategically like made that way in the movie. You're learning all these things and you're like, man, that bitch. But then at the end, she talks about, well, this is why, you know.
I also find it interesting because, like, whether you're talking about Brittany Kaiser or when you're talking about, like, I remember I used to be a reporter, and so before, when there was all the things, I want to say it was like the Sinclair Broadcasting Group, where you had all the reporters and everything got, and they took all the videos and they were all saying like the exact same words, and it was like back to back to back to back to back, and people were like, oh my god, all the news is fake and everything is terrible, and it's your local news anchors and they're all doing this big bad thing. And it's like as if they had a choice. They don't have a choice, guys. They're owned by a larger corporation. And it's like, to that end, what you guys are saying about like, hey, like these people, it's their livelihood, and it's not their livelihood to lie. They may go into it with the right intentions, or saying like, hey, I want to help people, or I want to understand the other side, or whatever. And it's crazy just how it's interesting how quickly things can start to infiltrate your own mind without you even realizing it. Like you're like, I don't believe that thing XYZ, but as you've had to start to more people that talk about it, suddenly these ideas are becoming more normal. They're becoming normalized, and then it's really, really crazy. Just how everything kind of works together, and the way that everything is just being controlled. It's kind of, it's America.
We're taking our power back. We're taking our power back, okay? And that's the thing. Obviously, these events can sometimes, the goal and what I try to ask, like our team, what we try to figure out is, how do we make sure to leave people with a semblance of hope, or that they're actionable things that we can tell you to do, so that you're not just here like, oh, my data, what am I gonna do, you know? And so just stay mindful, right? And know that asking the right questions when you're working with a business, like, hey, what does your privacy policy look like? What are you going to do with my data? Even small businesses, because then you're holding just the entire eco chain accountable, right? It's not just about our actions, it's about holding others accountable as well. We really, really appreciate everybody coming tonight. And next week, we'll be here again, like Rebecca said, at the same time. We'll push out some more information, some takeaways from tonight for our newsletter. Again, please take the survey, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining. And if you need anything, we're here. Find us on our website, and thank you again. Have the best night ever. Get psycho, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.